nothing can change this prophecy, then you don't have any free will. You can't surprise God. God already knows what you're going to do before you're going to do it. He already knows what you're going to pray for before you pray for it, so why bother praying?
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Grab a seat because this one gets spicy fast. Today we're sitting in on a four-way clash where atheists Aaron and T-Jump go head-to-head with Christian apologists Cliff and Stewart, and nobody is holding back. It starts with whether life without a god is secretly hopeless, snowballs into a brutal showdown over free will, prophecy, and whether prayer actually does anything, and then somehow turns into Cliff explaining why everyone else's religion isn't real, without noticing he might be making the atheist argument for them. The tension is real, and the logic traps are even better. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for the back half, because that's where one side gets backed into a corner it never climbs out of. Before we get going, drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're watching from. I love seeing how far this community reaches. Alright, enough from me. Let's get into it.
How could something that is so inspirational to me be depressing to you?
Because it means nothing ultimately. It's very simple. If it is true that you and I were produced by and will eventually be annihilated by mindless, meaningless forces, then all your altruism is a jump into fantasy land.
So what you're telling me is that you have to reject science. We have to reject things that we know to be true.
False. I never said that once.
Well, you're saying that we can't be a product of evolution, right?
I never said that once. I said, if it is true that you were produced by and you will ultimately be annihilated by mindless, meaningless forces,
which is obviously the fact,
then despair is the only logical conclusion.
No, it's not remotely logical. Your worldview is morose. I've never understand why Christians come up with this.
I'm convinced that you were not produced by mindless, meaningless forces, and I'm convinced that you don't have to be annihilated. I'm convinced that there's real life now and there's life for eternity.
I'm sorry that you are convinced of things that are definitely not true. I'm sorry that you're convinced of that. More so.
Keep on saying that, but that's just as rude as if I keep on saying to you,
I'm sorry, you're wrong, period. I'm sorry.
Evidence. What's the evidence? You're just wrong. You can't just say you're wrong. What's the evidence? Think.
Yes, I have the evidence, and you don't. I have some understanding of this where you have none. You just keep making these assertions of things that don't make any sense.
When you say you're wrong, you have to give a better picture, a better answer that has more evidence. You can't just say it's wrong and act like that settles it.
You didn't. You said you were convinced of these incredible things without any evidence whatsoever, but you're convinced by them. I can give evidence for everything that convinces me. I have the evidence. You're telling me I don't. I do.
No, give it to me.
What I said was worse than you believing things that are not evidently nor even possibly true. And both of those statements are demonstrably correct. It's not evidently true. It's not even possibly true because there's no precedent or parallel or verified phenomenon indicating that any such possibility exists. You've got nothing. No possibility, no evidence.
I'd like to do that. I'd like to give you some of the evidence. So, for example, I can quote Julian Mussolino, who's a cognitive scientist, who says the vast majority of people in his field, cognitive science, neurology, biology, they all conclude that there is no soul and that the brain is purely material. And so you're saying that all of the experts in all the relevant fields are wrong because feelings? That seems to be what you're saying. And it seems like if I can shock your brain and cause you to feel love for anyone I particularly choose, would that prove you wrong? Because it's clearly just a material thing I'm sticking in your head and a material interaction with the brain that causes you to feel love. Doesn't that prove that love is purely physical?
No, because my experience, my life, and I'm convinced your life, you know very well that although you have a physical body and you can have bad moods due to chemical imbalances in your body, you can be depressed, you can be schizophrenic, you can be paranoid because of chemical imbalances in your body, which are very real, they're not made up, that if you're not subject to those chemical imbalances, that you have a free will. You choose to love or to hate. You choose to be apathetic or to love. That's my experience of everyday life.
Watch how fast Cliff gives the whole game away. He meets someone who finds meaning without a cosmic supervisor, and he can't process it, so Cliff says despair is the only logical conclusion. Here's what people miss about that move. That is not an argument, that is a confession. Cliff is telling you the only reason his life feels meaningful is that he believes someone is watching and keeping score forever. Aaron flips it perfectly when he calls that worldview morose, because think about it, who is actually the sad one here? The person finding wonder in a real universe, or the person who needs an eternal reward or he'd see no reason to be kind? This is the part that blows my mind. When Aaron pushes back, he makes the cleanest point in the whole exchange. Aaron says there's no precedent or parallel or verified phenomenon for any of these claims. Sit with that. Cliff wants to talk about evidence, and the second evidence is on the table. His side has nothing. Not weak evidence, not contested evidence, zero. Then T-Jump brings the receipts. T-Jump says the vast majority of researchers in cognitive science, neurology, and biology conclude there is no soul and the brain is purely material. And you have to understand why that lands. Let me give you a real one. Go back to 1848. A railroad foreman named Phineas Gage took an iron rod clean through his skull and survived. But the gentle, reliable man his friends knew was gone, replaced by someone impulsive and erratic. Doctors documented every bit of it, and that single case helped build modern neuroscience because it screamed one thing. The self lives in the tissue. Damage the brain, you change the person. That is not a ghost. That is biology.
I'm convinced, Aaron, that you don't have to be faithful to your wife. I don't have to be faithful to my wife. You can be unfaithful. I can be unfaithful. We don't have to be faithful to our wives. We have a will, a free will.
Well, you asked for
you
the evidence
don't,
there.
because you're a Christian, and that's not possible for a Christian to have free will. Your belief in prophecy denies you that. You can't have a free will. If you cannot surprise God, who made up these prophecies like thousands of years ago, supposedly. And so all of these interactions for all these different generations of all these different people down through time, nothing can change this prophecy, then you don't have any free will. You can't surprise God. God already knows what you're going to do before you're going to do it. He already knows what you're going to pray for before you pray for it. So why bother praying?
Well,
You don't have free will. You can't.
It's very simple. Prayer is not the way to get the cosmic bellboy to fetch your bags and put a Mercedes in your driveway. Rather, prayer is an experiment in intimacy with God.
No,
it's not the way to
prayer,
twist God's arm and get what you want. That's crass manipulation.
No, that's not what prayer is.
Growing intimacy with God, love with God, or a spiritual relationship with God.
No,
it's not a way to get your bidding done by the.
No, that's not what prayer is. Prayer is talking to your imaginary friend until you believe he's listening to you.
No, it is not.
That's exactly what it is. That's what every prayer to every religion is. Why is it to every religion?
What you do when you
prays?
pray. It's not what I'm doing when I pray.
What about the Muslims when they pray? What about the Buddhists? The Hindus? Great example. What about when they pray?
Yeah, what about it?
They have a personal relationship with their God who appears before them and talks with them.
No, they
audibly,
do not. That is
visibly.
not respecting the Upanishads. That's not respecting the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah, well, it's respecting
Hinduism
George Harrison.
teaches that everything is part of God. They don't have a relationship with a separate being, God.
They
Everything
do
is
have a
part of God. If
relationship.
you respect the Upanishads and if you respect the Bhagavad Gita, you know very well they do not claim to have a personal relationship with God.
I know very well.
Being who's God.
I know very well that some Hindus do proclaim to have a personal relationship with God. Specifically,
fine, but that's not out of the Vedas and Upanishads or Bhagavad Gita.
Actually,
that's
it
their
is.
own whatever.
I just spoke to a Hare Krishna several times. I work with the channel of them, and they do literally just quote the Bhagavad Gita, specifically saying, "Here is where if you say the Hare Krishna mantra, you can have a personal relationship with the God who will specifically speak to you." So they do say that.
Okay, this is the trap Cliff never escapes. Aaron points out you can't have free will if you cannot surprise God. Let me break down why that line is doing real work. If your God knows the future perfectly, then every choice you will ever make is locked in before you are born. You cannot do otherwise, because if you could, God would have been wrong, and a perfect God can't be wrong. So free will and divine foreknowledge cannot both be true. You have to pick one, and most believers desperately want both. Then Aaron goes after prayer, and this is the part Cliff truly can't answer. Hassan says God already knows what you're going to pray for before you pray for it, so why bother praying? Watch the response. Cliff says prayer is an experiment in intimacy with God. That's a beautiful phrase, and it is also a complete dodge. He was handed a question about cause and effect, and he answered with poetry. That is exactly what happens when the logic has cornered you. You reach for feelings instead. And here's what people don't realize about the harshest line in the clip. Aaron says prayer is talking to your imaginary friend until you believe he's listening. It sounds brutal, but he's describing a documented psychological loop. You speak into silence, you read meaning into random outcomes, the hits get remembered, and the misses get quietly forgiven. Psychologists call that confirmation bias, and it runs identically whether you pray to one God or to 30 of them. Cliff needs his prayer to be the single exception in all of human history. He never once shows you why it would be.
But I wanted to bring up your other point
God,
earlier.
For them? It's 330 million deities.
No, you know,
who is God for them?
You
It
gotta
doesn't matter
understand the
which one.
hierarchy.
They have a personal relationship, so it proves you're.
No, I was just at a Hindu temple. That's false. I was
No,
just
that's
at a Hindu
not
temple
false.
because a
That's
Hindu
not
family
false.
came to my church thinking that non-denominational meant interfaith. And so they said, please come to our Hindu temple. So I went there. I was there with the pouring of the milk on all the statues and sticking the fruit in the mouths and then having a food fight. I was there for it all. And then they had to play these songs for literally, when it's their new year, they have to play a song the same way for 48 hours. And if they mess up with one single note, they have to start over. Okay, what is that saying right there? It's saying it's all based on rituals. And again, getting back to Aaron's earlier point, grace versus works righteousness. And
okay, so you're telling us
that is a gigantic divide. And all of Aaron's points and indictments towards the character of the Christian God is always based off of his response to fundamentalist Christians who do base their theology on works righteousness. That's why they have the pride, the tremendous ego and judgmentalism, the self-righteousness. That's why they're saying you have to do X, Y, and Z in order to work to God, in order to get to heaven, because it's all stick.
Okay, so I can just
so that's who you're fighting against.
I can just quote the Buddhist saints. To develop love, saints have stressed forming a close personal relationship with Krishna through Brahma. Yes, you can develop a close personal relationship.
Yes, and it depends. When you say you go to a Hindu temple and they do something different.
Of Buddha. Buddha never once talked about God. He was agnostic.
Yes, he did.
Gautama Buddha was agnostic. Read the teachings of Buddha. Buddha did not talk about God once.
Yes, he did.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he did, because he said whether the gods exist or not is irrelevant.
Well, okay, fine.
So he did talk about God.
All right, in that sense. He never talked about God being real who we could have a relationship with. He was totally agnostic.
And here is the irony Cliff doesn't seem to notice about himself. Watch what he spends this whole stretch doing. On Hinduism, Cliff says those believers do not claim to have a personal relationship with God. On Buddhism, Cliff says Buddha never once talked about God. He was agnostic. He pushes it even further and says Buddha never talked about a God being real who we could actually have a relationship with. Do you see what's happening? Cliff is confidently taking apart other people's gods. He's using skepticism, history, and the actual sacred texts to show exactly why those faiths don't hold together, and honestly, he's good at it. He just flatly refuses to aim that same lens at his own beliefs for even a second. That right there is the entire atheist position in one moment. Every single believer on the planet is already an atheist about thousands of other gods. Aaron and T-Jump simply go one god further. Cliff will gladly walk you through why the Upanishads never deliver a personal deity, and the atheist is only asking him to hold his own book to that identical standard. The instant he tries, the special treatment for his side just evaporates, and that's the part he can't sit with. Then Stuart hands us the cleanest example of the whole night. He describes a Hindu ceremony where they have to play a song the same way for 48 hours, and if they mess up one single note, they have to start the entire thing over. Stuart says that like it exposes the religion as hollow, mechanical ritual, and he is absolutely right that it's ritual. What he completely misses is that every religion runs on that same machinery. Fixed prayers, exact wording, sacred repetition, sacraments performed in a precise order. Get one piece wrong and you begin again. Entire bodies of liturgy have survived word for many centuries. For one reason, the rule was never to improvise. That is not a fingerprint left by a god. That is human beings being extraordinarily good at protecting their habits and then deciding those habits are holy. So when a debate like this ends with two Christians carefully explaining why everybody else's God is a myth, I genuinely just want to say you are almost there. You already did the hard part. You looked at the supernatural claims of billions of people across history and you found them wanting. The only thing the atheist is asking is that you stay consistent and take that very last step yourself. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.